This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rappin. Joining me this week are two fantastic human beings and a very, very special guest. I'm here with Nick White.
Hey.
René Rodriguez.
Hola.
And David Pepose.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being on the show, my friend. You are a creator of the series Spencer and Locke. Thank you so much for being on the show this week. We're really excited to talk to you about comics and stuff, but, let me get into the question I ask every single week to every person that's ever been on this show. How have you been, and how have comic books been? Let's start with you, David. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and tell us what comics you've been reading.
Sure. Well, I got my start in the comics industry about 10 years ago. I worked in the editorial department as an intern at DC Comics. I worked on books like Final Crisis, Batman R.I.P., Green Lantern, Secret Origins. And coming from there, I wound up working as the reviews editor at Newsarama for the better part of a decade before kind of tripping and falling into writing a comic of my own, Spencer and Locke, which is What If Calvin and Hobbes Grew Up in Sin City. We've got our sequel that's going to be hitting stores in May. And we just announced my latest book, Going to the Chapel, which is Die Hard at a Wedding. As far as books that I've been reading lately, there's been a lot of really cool stuff going on. I've been reading, I read Marvel Team Up the other week. I really love that kind of flip book element with the Miss Marvel and Spider-Man team up. Die by Kieran Gillen is fantastic, as is Peter Cannon Thunderbolt. Self-Made over at Image, I've also really been enjoying. It has kind of a Black Mirror kind of vibe. And then, of course, Tom King's work on Batman. The Nightmares arc has been kind of this very audaciously experimental work that's been kind of a cool jam session with a bunch of top flight artists and characters. So, it's been really cool. I just reading all the stuff that's been coming in lately.
Very cool. That's awesome, man. I didn't realize that you had worked at Newsarama for so long. I want to get into that. We will get into that into the second half of the show, I promise, because I'm really curious about what it's like working over there. But, man, you're reading a lot of the same books that we are. We are a 100% pro-die podcast at this point, because we all want to die, but also we love the comic Die. I'm kidding about that first part.
I feel like Kieran Gillen is the type of writer I want to be someday, because he is just so ruthlessly smart, infuriatingly so, and the way that he's sort of able to break from convention is something that, for me as a writer, I'm particularly jealous of, and something that I always try to emulate.
Totally. I just have to wonder, are you an RPG player? Are you like a tabletop RPG player?
I wish. I always laugh. I say, the thing about Dungeons and Dragons and the like is that it requires friends to do it. But I'm a big, I really enjoy video game RPGs, Skyrim, Fallout. I have to actually be careful when I play those games, because otherwise I will lose all of my writing time.
Right.
Like any of the Bethesda games in that regard, I'm a huge fan of. And one of these days, maybe somebody will adopt me for their D&D campaign one of these days.
Okay, I will schedule that, and we will get it all figured out. Don't worry. We've got a bunch of tabletop nerds here on the show. We'll make it happen. Cool. Well, René, how about you? How have you been? How have comic books been?
Oh, I've been super duper there, pal.
Okay.
It's been good. It's been pretty good since C2E2, and I've got a lot of comics that I've been trying to read and catch up on, and instead of doing that, I've been buying other comics, so, it's pretty good.
That's smart. That's how you never run out. That's how you make sure it never happens.
Yeah, exactly. But this week I finally read Tom King's The Vision, which was super good, super sad. I read it at 3 a.m, though.
So you just cried yourself to sleep, is what you're saying?
You're gonna love all of his other Marvel stuff, René. You're gonna.
What makes you think I'm gonna read all of his other Marvel stuff? Not that I'm against it, but just how dare you?
It's a joke, René. After he finished that, I think that was he didn't do anything else at Marvel before DC made it exclusive.
Oh, exactly.
Okay. Either way, it was really good. I didn't cry myself to sleep, but I was very sad. But it was great. I also, going along with the sadness train, I also read Sweet Tooth Volume 2.
Oh, no.
Man.
Yeah, it was like a mega volume, but not like the omnibus volume. But it was like a collection of like 2 or 3 trades, something like that. It was really good, but this book is sad. I am sad.
That's the Jeff Lemire. Who else is on that?
That's just him.
It's just him. He does the story and art, but Jose Villarrubia does the colors, which I love the colors.
Yeah.
They're fantastic. And Pat Brousseau does the lettering, which I feel like the lettering of that book does not get enough credit because like it changes up and it's also really good.
Did you read like these books back to back, René? Because that's like does not seem like a smart idea for one's emotional well-being.
Well, I'm a super happy guy, so sometimes I need an emotional kick to the. Yeah, I need an emotional kick to the nads, just to ground me, And then we're gonna hit the. Oh wow! I just kind of realized all the books I read this past week were super sad because I read Monster Volume 2, which that book is amazing.
That book is dope,
but it's so sad, so much darkness, and then the last thing I read was the latest chapter of Hell's Paradise, Jigokuraku, which is a manga by Yuji Kaku, and it's I've been reading it through Shonen Jump, even though it's more of an adult series. I don't actually think it runs in Jump, but you can read it on the site, and that is an awesome series. It's about a ninja who is on death row and is given a chance to go back to his wife if he goes to this mysterious island to find the elixir of life for the emperor. And on the island, there's just a bunch of monsters and this crazy, like, god and all these other assassins that are also supposed to, like, try and get the elixir, but they're also trying to kill each other. And it's super nuts, and it's also... the art is amazing. It's also really dark, but it reminds me a lot of the series Samurai Deeper Kyo and Berserk, which are also very kind of dark but beautifully drawn series, and it's a really good series, but don't read it at night.
Okay.
That's the only thing I can say. So yeah, a lot of sadness happening this week, but I'm still feeling really good. So yay!
Just wait for that other shoe to drop. That's all I'm saying, man. Just beware.
There's always a third shoe, though, Mike.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means. I just said it. I don't know.
I was just gonna move past it and ask Nick how he's been and what comics he's been reading.
It's a good call.
Yeah.
Hey, things have been fine, other than the fact that I guess I'm a little bit older now. It was my birthday yesterday. Yay!
Yeah, man.
So
Happy birthday!
Like,
felicidades.
And I'm not bringing that up in terms of like let's all congratulate me. I'm only doing it to further defend the fact that I want to complain about the weather again, and I feel like me being older allows me to. It's been snowing like fucking mad for the past 4 or 5 hours in Michigan. Literally, it's insane. I don't understand this. Whatever. What the hell? What have I been up to? I've been playing a lot of Moonlighter, which is a really, really cool... I think it's for Switch. I know I've been playing it on PC. Sort of a pixel art Legend of Zelda kind of game where you run a shop in a typical RPG, JRPG village during the day, and you sell items, and then at night you venture out to these dungeons on the outskirts of town where you try to collect items that you go and then you sell them during the day in your shop. And it's all about economics. Like, you have to try to figure out what's the perfect price point for a good. And when the people in the city come up to the items, they either make a smiley face or a frowning face. And so you have to sort of adjust all the prices to make more money, to get better gear, to get more items. Anyway, we all know about feedback loops in game design. I'm sure everyone's super well educated on that.
Oh yeah, I'm super well versed in that.
I know.
I was gonna say, do you get a business degree if you finish that game?
It's really fun. It's super cute. If you like pixel art, I'd recommend that you check it out. In terms of what I've been reading, I just finally got my comics for the first time in a couple weeks yesterday, so I've just been kind of reading some older stuff that I've been put off. I picked up the first 8 issues of Ice Cream Man in a Comixology sale, so I read the first issue of that last night. That's written by Max W. Maxwell Prince, art by Martin Morazzo, colors by Chris O'Halloran. Both Prince and Morazzo previously worked together on IDW's The Electric Sublime about 2 years ago. When they've been apart, Prince is perhaps best known for 1 Week in the Library. Morazzo did Snowfall, I think with Joe Harris, maybe about 3 years ago. Both of those were from Image. Really interesting book. Like, the beginning, it just kicks off in this way that's just super fascinating. You've got these kids waiting in a line to get ice cream with their parents. Except there's one kid who's by himself, and we follow him after he gets the ice cream, and we follow him home as the sun sets, and he approaches a house that does not appear to be that well lit. It's only added, the unsettling nature of this is only made even more apparent by the fact that he apparently doesn't eat the cone, clearly this kid's a monster, and just chucks it into his front yard. It's chilling. Like, if this book already wasn't frightening enough, it's like, what kind of sociopath are we dealing with? Like, what's going on here?
Sure.
I feel like you're reading the script to us. Like not that I'm complaining, but that was very in-depth.
It's super interesting, like, right off the bat. And I'll just give you a little bit more. I don't want to get too far, but, like, nobody meets him at the door. The kid puts a clothespin over his nose before entering. Again, he's saying nothing throughout this whole thing. All the lights are off in the house. We can tell the mail has been piled up by the front door. And this all seems like business as usual to him. And throughout all of this, while we're getting nothing from the kid, the narrator is just talking at length about spiders and the poisons of spiders. And we realize the kid has a spider named Rupert.
As you do.
Very weird stuff. Very interesting.
Sure.
And then we cut to the other side of the town where some lady is at the police claiming a wolf man in the woods sucked the skin off of her cat. And for proof, she pulls the cat skeleton out of her purse.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
And slowly we see these two narratives on the opposite sides of town come together. And it's weird, it's jarring, it's very Twilight Zone. The narration is very much like Rod Serling Twilight Zone, if you've ever watched that. I guess you could also say it's sort of like Black Mirror, but I'd say more Twilight Zone. So I'm hooked. It's very weird. This weird ice cream man figure seems to bounce in and out of the issue, and from what I've heard, he continues to do this in other issues. It's just very subtly creepy. It's not like gory. It's not like shocking. It's just perpetually unnerving in a way that I guess Silent Hill games are known for. The other thing I read briefly that I'll go into is I read a couple stories, out of Hellboy, The Complete Short Stories, Volume 1. I read Nature of the Beast and King Vold. Both have the exact same credits, which is Mignola wrote them and did the art. Dave Stewart did the colors. Pat Brousseau did the letters. So here's Pat Brousseau again after working on Renee's thing.
I mean, not my...
Yeah, well, your pick, Renee. It was your, read.
Yeah.
I mean, I would work with Pat Brousseau. I'm not going to say no.
They were just really short, really enjoyable stories, and I will say I think they really bring forward one of my favorite elements of Hellboy, which is the fact that, considering Hellboy being what he is, having been where he's been, having seen what he's seen, he's still always shocked when rumors and legends of certain fabled things turn out to be true. Like, he can't believe it. Like, every time he's like, how is this thing a thing? And I'm like, look in the mirror. Like, what are you?
Right.
Yeah. Beyond that, just one other thing. The second story I absolutely love because Brutenholm, who's basically his adopted dad, sends him off on a quest to help one of his colleagues do research in Norway. And, like, it's a moment where you truly know that Brutenholm is really his dad, because the moment, like, that your parent signs you up to assist family friends and things you really don't want to do, like, that's when you know you're dealing with a parent figure. And he's like, now, of course, I'm not saying you have to go. And it's like, yeah, okay. So...
And Hellboy goes, right?
Yeah, exactly. So just some great little short itty-bitty Hellboy stories, which I realize itty-bitty Hellboy is its own thing. Don't be confused. Just little enjoyable Hellboy narratives, which sometimes I think are the best ones, honestly. So
Gotcha.
But that's been me. What about you, Mike?
Well, I've read a bunch of stuff. I started to catch up on just a backlog of books that I've been avoiding. I don't know why. But I sat down and read Murder Falcon number 3 through 6.
Ooh.
And this might be. Have you read this, David?
Really good. Daniel Warren Johnson is a beast.
Yeah. Well, that's my whole thing. Like, I read this, and my first line that I wrote down is "fuck yes" to this book. Like, I think this is the most fun I've had reading a comic in a really, really long time. Every issue just is amped up after one thing after another after another. The art is unbelievable. Like, I can't believe that Daniel Warren Johnson puts this out monthly. It makes no sense. Every single square, every inch and like centimeter of the paper is used to tell part of the story in a way. Like, there's so much detail in this book. This is Daniel Warren Johnson writing in pencils with Mike Spicer on colors and Russ Wooten on letters. And holy smokes, I can't sell this book enough. It's going to be 8 issues, so I read 3 through 6, and I'm waiting to read 7 and 8 together because I know this, like, things basically went from hell yeah cool to oh my god, this is the greatest story ever in issue 5, I believe it was, where they introduce a new character, and oh my god, everything that I love about listening to heavy metal is reflected in this. You can tell that Daniel Warren Johnson loves the idea of the absurd, over-the-top, grand scale that some metal bands put into their, like, narrative of who they are. And as someone who listens to a lot of metal and is a big fan of that just funniness of how metal can be, like, he totally gets it, and every single issue has been a reflection of that. There's been a pretty good story to like narrative going on with their main character, but on the whole, like, I can't believe how fantastic this book is. Like, Mike Spicer, by the way, I just want to call out, like, he finds a way to make every single page of this book pop off, or like explode in your face with color. Like, every page turn is an explosion of color, and it's satisfying from corner to corner of every page. And I really want to also call out Russ Wooten. His lettering deserves serious recognition.
Russ Wooten's one of my favorite letterers. It's probably him and Clayton Cowles. And he does a really interesting thing with his lettering, where most of his balloons are very circular, whereas I think industry trend is to do more oblong kind of balloons. And you can, like, he's got like a very signature kind of style to him. It's really beautiful. Like, he is just terrific. I mean, I was going to say, you should look at all of his work on Invincible. He is just like, he is like next level, and he's like instantly recognizable if you know what to look for.
Yeah, we're a pretty big Invincible podcast as well. I think René and we've talked about that book nonstop when it was coming out. We have some deep love for that series on the whole.
I'm starting to tear up thinking about it, and I'm not lying. Oh,
yeah. I mean, Russ Wooten's lettering is it's top notch, and it's rare that you really start to. I don't know. Like, a lot of times, I think people aren't necessarily paying attention to lettering in books, and that's understandable. It's one of those things that if it's done well, it's not seen. But really, like, page after page in this book, it's clear that, like, there's so much love and effort that went into making things look cool, like making the dialogue look as cool as the rest of the imagery that's happening on the page. And I really, really hope he gets some recognition for this book, because this by far might be one of his best, like, jobs beyond, like, anything. Like, his Invincible work, really good. I know his name, he's been on a million other books as well, but this one is just fantastic. So I'm savoring the last 2 issues of this, because I really want to just have I'm just going to blare Behemoth or something in my apartment and just read the last 2 issues of this. It's going to be a fantastic event for me, and I really feel bad for my cats and my fiance in my apartment, because it's going to be a time for them. But yeah, so let's move on. Let's talk about comics that are coming out this upcoming week, I guess, or in the near future. Comic books are dropping on April 17, 2019. I want to know what you guys are excited about. Let's start with Nick.
Okay, for me this week, it's got to be Gideon Falls number 12. That's written by Jeff Lemire, drawn by Andrea Sorrentino, and colors by Dave Stewart. It's always difficult when I pick this book, because it is definitely the thing I'm most excited for, but it's always the most difficult thing to try to talk about. Even for people that are a little bit behind, it's always comes across as either, just crazed rantings about something that even I don't fully understand. Right. But I'll take a few seconds to take a crack at this. So a few days ago, I reread issues 8 and 9, and then read 10 and 11 for the first time. And while not to take away from the brilliance of the first 2 pair I listed, 10 and 11 might be Andrea Sorrentino's finest work And for anybody who's read his stuff, that's really saying something because,
Right.
I mean, his Green Arrow work, his Wolverine work, his other Marvel stuff, it's just, there's so many just amazing issues there. That being said, I will sort of try to dance around beat around the bushes here, but
please, I really want to read this book, Nick. Don't spoil it for me.
So 10 finally had us flash back to the fall of 1886 in Gideon Falls, where we had 12 men and women that ended up dead by Christmas, and we get to see some of the instigating events surrounding the Black Barn, which is one of the big ominous figures in the book. It's an absolutely amazing sequence. We have some really cool, like, parallel side-by-side sequences following the two main plots of this book, which are the Norton plot and the Father Quinn plot. Stewart gets a chance to flex his power color combo of black and red, which everybody from Hellboy is already pretty familiar with.
Right.
And this book takes a turn towards the cosmic and the multidimensional. But anyone who knew that this book had links basically to Twin Peaks probably should have seen that coming. The upcoming issue will take us back to 1886. The artwork in this book is absolutely insane. The work in 10 and 11 is just unbelievable. There's a 2-page spread that is, I can't even, wow.
Yeah. You sent me a picture of this, right?
Yeah.
That was something, to say the least.
Yeah. If you're not reading this book, get on this book. It's kind of weird. It's kind of out there. If you're into Twin Peaks, if you're into weird stuff, I guess that's it. If you're into weird stuff, read this book.
Gotcha. David, what about you? What are you excited for in the coming weeks or next week, if you have something?
Well, there's a lot of cool stuff coming out.
Totally.
I'm excited to read Angel #0 by my pal Brian Edward Hill. That was kind of cool that they kind of announced that book, dropped it like Beyonce. I'm excited for Vita Ayala is taking over Xena next week, Xena Warrior Princess.
Yeah.
We'll have another issue of Peter Cannon Thunderbolt, where Peter Cannon kind of falls into more of like the indie comics universe, which that's a very cool way to go about doing it. Matt Rosenberg on Uncanny X-Men, I've really been digging because he's taken the series to the point where, and I was a little skeptical initially going in with the relaunch, but it's so unpredictable now. You have no idea which direction it's going to go. So I kind of like, sort of, it being on my toes a little bit. And also Chip Zdarsky's Spider-Man Life Story. I saw the preview for issue 2 earlier in the week, and I feel like as the series goes on, the more excited I'm going to be. I like that sort of alt universe kind of stuff. I've always kind of wanted to write something in that vein, and so seeing Tony Stark and Captain America on opposite sides of a worsening Vietnam War, and Peter Parker being in the middle of it, that's kind of cool. I'm really into that. I actually got a sneak look over at Batman 69 that's coming out this week, and
cool.
It's really good. I'm Tom is really like sticking the landing with this Nightmares arc. I think it's going to read really cool in trade. It's sort of, like I said earlier, kind of a jam band. I see also Assassination #2 is coming out, and I should have mentioned that when we were talking about books I was reading before, because I read the first issue of that and I love it. You think you know Erica Henderson from Squirrel Girl? You don't know her at all. Seeing kind of the range that she brings to this, and that Kyle Starks is just so damn funny with it. That is probably one of the most excited books, or excited I am about books coming out from Image next week. But yeah, it looks like a really solid week for comics. So I'm really excited to check it all out.
Totally. I mean, I grabbed the first issue of Assassination. I just haven't read it yet. I've heard it's really good things.
I think because Erica Henderson's on it, like, people have a certain expectation, and
sure,
like the spin that she puts on this book is so terrific, and it sells this kind of tongue-in-cheek script so well Yeah, it's really terrific, and probably one of my favorite Skybound things to come out since Outer Darkness.
Oh, Outer Darkness. Oh, don't get me started on that book.
Yeah,
I love it. I love it too much. Renee, what about you? What are you excited for this upcoming week?
Things.
Okay, cool. I'll just move on.
Sorry, I got distracted because I was like, because I heard Zdarsky's Spider-Man book, and then everything else went out the window.
I see.
Because he just did Spectacular Spider-Man not too long ago, right?
Right.
So that'll be good. So now I'm excited for that. But the other thing I'm excited for is just the new chapter of One Piece by Eiichiro Oda, which, I don't think I try not to talk about One Piece a lot on the podcast because we're almost at 1,000 chapters.
Yeah, could you give us just a brief summary?
I was going to say, this is the last one, right, Renee? Like, they're done now. This is it.
Well, I mean, we've still got a while before 1,000. We're only at 939.
Oh, okay.
God.
But, I mean, it's a great series. It's about pirates. They're really bad at being pirates, but you're having a good time. It's great. And this arc that we're in right now, it's the Wano Country arc, is one that like people have been waiting for a while. I think the only other arc that was kind of like people were really waiting for was the Fish Island arc, which again, if you're in the fandom, you're like, oh yeah, can't wait for that to happen. But Wano's getting nuts. It's exciting. We're getting close to the end game. We're getting to the beginning of the end game.
Right.
Shit's about to go down.
Yeah, I'll just catch up on those 1,000 chapters real quick.
But but pay $25 a year, and all of One Piece can be yours.
I'm already there. I'm doing that. I'm reading Assassination Classroom right now. Got caught up on My Hero Academia. I'm in it. I'm reading these manga. One Piece is it's a mountain. And I know that if I start on it, I won't be able to stop. So I want to catch up on other things before I get too deep into the One Piece world.
Oddly enough, they climb a mountain that has a river that goes over it. So
perfect.
Go cash your check, Renee. Go.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's in the mail.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah. Well, so for me this week, I'm excited for Age of X-Men Nextgen #3 because there's so many X-Men books coming out. How could I not talk about them? I am the go-to person when it comes to all things X-Men. So I'm really liking this series that Ed Brisson is writing with Marcus Toe on art. It's easily my favorite of the Age of X-Men, universe thing that's happening right now. The ongoing joke of the 616 universe, like the universe before this Age of X-Men started, being Glob Herman's fan fiction. Like there's a character and he's writing fan fiction and it's the old 616 universe. This will forever be one of my favorite jokes and my favorite thing about this whole event. But I'm really liking this series. I love these characters. They're all the teenage X-Men that go to high school. I love that side of X-Men in general, and so to actually get a book that's just focused on those characters in that life is like my favorite thing in the world. The X-Men writing team, they seem to get that people like me want that kind of stuff, and I'm glad that they're addressing it and they're giving us what we want, which is what all fans want, right? So I'm just a big fan of this Age of X-Men event. I think it's so much fun, and they know where the pitfalls are, and they've just been completely avoiding them, and I appreciate it a lot. For our show this week, we have a very special guest. As we said in the first half, David Pepose, the writer and creator of Spencer and Locke, and the new volume of Spencer and Locke 2, that is coming out very, very soon. David, could you tell us a little bit about what people can expect from Spencer and Locke 2 if they've read the first volume?
Yeah, well, if you're unfamiliar with the original Spencer and Locke, our easy elevator pitch is: what if Calvin and Hobbes grew up in Sin City? It's about hard-boiled detective Locke and his partner, who happens to be a 7-foot-tall imaginary talking panther named Spencer. For our sequel, however, we're taking the Fables approach. No comic strip is safe. We're doing hard-boiled Calvin and Hobbes versus hardcore Beetle Bailey. We're going to have our new villain, Roach Riley. He's kind of like if Heath Ledger's Joker had survived the events of the Deer Hunter. And they're going to sort of be on a collision course, a big head-to-head, as it were. So we're really excited. The first issue of Spencer and Locke 2 drops May 1st, the Wednesday before Free Comic Book Day. And this is, our sequel. It's bigger and better than ever. And it's been a long time in the making. So I'm really excited for readers to get to see what we've been cooking up all this time.
Yeah, I mean, you were super gracious enough to let us read that issue before it came out, and I will say, going from I read Volume 1 leading into the first issue of Volume 2, and I can tell the quality just like went up 100 times over. Like, honestly, the series feels like so much better than the first one, and the first one was good. I enjoyed it, but like the second one, holy cow, you guys have seriously knocked it out of the park with that first issue. I
feel like I think we all leveled up a lot over the course of our first volume. And on top of that, we just got to know each other. I mean, the great thing about Spencer and Locke 2 is the whole band is back. My artist and co-creator, Jorge Santiago Jr., our colorist, Jason Smith, our letterer, Colin Bell, and our variant cover artists, Mon House and Joe Mulvey, they're all back. And, the core creative team each were nominated for a Ringo Award for our work in the first volume last year. And seeing how well we've kind of gelled together since our time in the trenches last time, it certainly made the production of Volume 2 100 times easier than the first volume. And I really think that the bar of quality, it really has gone up. I mean, I can't say enough great things about Jorge's art in this book. It's really because he's so comfortable with the characters now, there's so much he can do. And we get to kind of throw in a few different genres into the mix, similar to like what we did in our first volume, where we had a nice little sci-fi interlude. Now we're getting to sort of inject bits of, from war comics or from horror or, even a little bit of an unexpected superhero nod in the middle of this. Jorge's potential is, I think limitless. And so seeing him really kind of tear out on this book, it inspires me to bring my A game, and it inspires me to kind of throw everything in the kitchen sink at him, because I know I'll knock it out of the park.
Totally. I noticed the dramatic change in the art going from Volume 1 to Volume 2, and that Jorge's art just is phenomenally better. And I'm not trying to insult the previous volume, but you can tell there was a ton of growth between Volumes 1 and Volume 2. It's incredible.
Yeah, I think he and I, we talk constantly, in terms of just how we build up a page. I mean, we could have a page long email just talking about panel layouts, because we're both very verbose and cerebral in our creative process. And but honestly, now Jorge kind of knows what I'm about and what I dig, and I know what he likes and what he enjoys doing. And so it's been a really cool partnership, and watching it grow and evolve has been really thrilling for me. And just being able to say, okay, I know that Jorge really likes horror. Let's see what he does with a bunch of killer Nazi mutant snowmen, for example. That'll be a nice hook for our third issue that's in pre-orders right now. And he just the guy is just an artist's artist, and I can't say enough good things about him.
Speaking of you bringing up the members of your creative team and whatnot, I have to wonder, being someone who always kind of is curious about the nuts and bolts and looking under the hood of things, how did what was sort of the inception of your creative team? How did that come to be? I know that at Image, you have to show up with everybody on board. They're not going to assign you anybody. You're not going to be given an editor or recommended an artist. How did this process work with Action Lab?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the Image model, because I say that it's very similar to the Image model in that regard.
Okay.
You have to come in with your own team already in place. And so the way that my team came together, Colin Bell, our letterer, was actually the first person on board. I've known Colin for years. He used to freelance for me at Newsarama on the reviews team before he became a fancy and schmancy professional letterer. And so when I had written the first issue script and treatment for Spencer and Locke, and I thought maybe I would try to put it together, as an actual pitch to shop around, which was kind of like a forbidden, unreal thought for me at the time. Colin was the letterer I knew. And so I said, hey, buddy, like, if I did this, would you, letter it for me? And I think he probably was like, this isn't going to happen. Sure, why not? Jorge was the next member of the team. And of course, finding the right artist is crucial. It's really the thing that'll make or break your book. And so I looked at Justin Jordan and The Strange Talent of Luther Strode as kind of my blueprint for the launch of this book. It was Justin's breakout book. It kickstarted the rest of his career. And Justin's a very smart guy. He's got a lot of great ideas. But I think the smartest thing that he did for Luther Strode was he brought on Tradd Moore. Because Tradd is such just a next level artist that you could write anything. And as Tradd's drawing it, people are going to look at it. So right. Yeah. I thought, where's the next Tradd Moore going to come from? And, so I looked at the art schools. Tradd is a graduate of the Savannah College of Art and Design. So I looked there. I looked at RISD, SVA, the Kubert School. Anybody who had a portfolio from an art school that talked about comics or sequential art, I looked them up. And, I emailed a lot of people, but Jorge really kind of stuck out at me quickly because he had that sort of energy and fluidity to his artwork, particularly with the action sequences. But he also had a very expressive core to it all, very emotional, so it really worked out nicely because he and I have similar sensibilities in that regard, that we love, especially having these very kind of tearjerker, heartbreaking moments in our scripts. So that's something that he and I kind of clicked on very early on, and that kind of pushed me to include more of that stuff in the series. Jason Smith was kind of the final piece of the puzzle. It was really tough finding the right colorist, and people talk about, how can I find the right artist? And with enough numbers, you can do that. If you reach out to enough people, you can find a good artist for your book. But finding the right colorist is something that I don't think people talk about a lot. A good colorist can elevate any art. A bad colorist can tank anything. And we went through a couple of different colorists before we found Jason. Our first colorist was very nice, but their style did not fit Jorge's art. It was a little too fluorescent. It didn't quite work for his style. And then we had another colorist who took our money and vanished. That was not.
Oh, geez.
That's usually a strike against a person. I mean,
and this was somebody who was a professional who should have known better. And then finally, kind of out of desperation, I posted on Facebook one day saying, hey, I'm looking for a colorist. And Taylor Esposito, letterer Taylor Esposito, was nice enough to say, hey, have you met my buddy Jason Smith? He does work over at Hi-Fi. And the moment that Jason's colors were on Jorge's inks, I not only knew that this was going to be a book, I knew that it was going to be a book that people were going to notice. The first 6 pages of Spencer and Locke Volume 1, that's exactly what we pitched to Action Lab. There are no changes whatsoever. What you see is what they saw. And it was great because I emailed Action Lab. I remember I'd emailed them after work one day. My work computer, I used to work at CBS in their publicity and PR department. I sent out my pitch because they had Adobe Acrobat on my work computers and I didn't have it at home. And so I remember I was after work, I was staying after work and I was catching up on some paperwork and I had sent out this pitch. And then about 20 minutes later, I got an email from Dave Dwanch, who at the time was president at Action Lab. And he said, how soon could you get this book done? And I felt like a chill run down my spine.
Oh yeah, dude.
I was like, I got to put my money where my mouth is. this book is actually going to be a thing. And yeah, I mean, I'll always love Dave Dwanch for pulling us out of the slush pile. But similar to the Image model, Action Lab, they have submissions editors, and they have sort of production editors just to make sure that your colors are in the right range, or sort of to give it one quick read through to make sure that you don't have any typos, or you're not dropping any sort of horrible words in it. But the actual production is on us. I sort of in that regard kind of served as the editor on the book as well as the writer, and I always say that 10 years as being a reviewer and 9 months working in editorial, that was all barely enough to get me across the finish line. It was what I thought I knew was just like a drop in the bucket. You can only pick up so much theory before it gets tested when you put it into practice, and right. I do think being a reviewer is one of the main reasons why the book I think worked as well as it did, is because I've been able to articulate what I do and don't like in a comic and why, and so that way I can kind of work with my team, particularly sort of in the early stages, things like thumbnails or initial palettes, and be able to say, hey, this thing looks a little wonky. What if we tried it like this? And that's also just the plus side of being on a creator-owned book, is that you're not pressured to do double shipping, and so you have the time to kind of finesse out any bugs and really able to kind of polish the work until it feels ready for prime time.
So yeah, I guess when you're working with Action Lab and stuff, when you were pitching this, were you pitching it as like a multi-arc story, or was this supposed to be like a one and done? Or, I mean, it sounds to me like you've got a billion ideas in your head about this series, which is awesome to hear. I think we talked a little bit before the show and during the break, but were you pitching this as a multi-arc story, or were you just going to see if volume 1 did well, maybe we could do another volume?
So it was a little column A and a little column B. When I spoke with Action Lab, I was a little conservative about it, because I knew that by virtue of this high concept, there are no comic strips more beloved than Calvin and Hobbes, and for good reason, because Bill Watterson is a genius, and he's a pioneer, and he's a trailblazer, and he brought so much to to comics as a medium, not just newspaper comics, but comics in general. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, this is a high concept that is definitely going to get attention. I don't know what kind of attention it's going to get. Right. I don't know if it's the good kind or the bad kind. But people will definitely look to see if we stick the landing. And so I thought, well, let's start with a first arc just to see if there's an audience for it, to make sure I don't get thrown in comic book jail. Because I thought, and part of the reason why we threw so much in the first volume was I said, I don't know if I'm going to get to do another comic after this. I might be I might be the pariah who ruined Calvin and Hobbes, for the rest of my career. So I wanted to throw everything in the kitchen sink, sort of check off my bucket list as best as I could, and try to give the rest of my team like a solid portfolio in case their reputations were forever tarnished for dealing with me. And but I did tell Action Lab, I said, if you like this, and this does have an audience, I've got some more ideas in my back pocket. And so this idea of taking the Fables approach with Roach Riley, that has always been part of the plan. That's been part of the plan since before I brought Jorge on board.
Gotcha.
It was a little sleight of hand, and I had to bite my tongue every time that I did an interview for the first volume to not spill the beans, to say this is just the tip of the iceberg, guys. I feel like I used to read the comic section of the newspaper as a kid, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and I remember all these different all these strips lived on the same page, so why wouldn't they live in the same universe? And taking that Fables approach really, it gives us so many different storytelling avenues and opportunities. Anytime you need a particular archetype, there's probably a comic strip that fits it. And so that was kind of a cool thing to have in the back pocket. And, while running parallel with, I didn't want to keep the characters of Spencer and Locke too static. We wanted to make sure that each story had its own kind of consequences and fallout and change and growth for these two characters. And that's something that's been really exciting to explore with Volume 2 as well, is just to, I think comics often get a bad rap as the illusion of change. You sort of have to put the toys back in the toy box in such a way for the next person to take it over. And creator own, you don't have to do that. And so I think, part of the appeal of a book like Spencer and Locke is people who have those warm feelings about Calvin and Hobbes and, think, oh, what would they look like as adults? Well, you get to keep building on that. And you get to keep saying, well, if this is true and this happened, then what's going to happen next? And so it's really been a cool way, I think, to keep the characters fresh, both as a creator and as a reader.
That's kind of awesome because I guess you kind of just answered one of my questions, because I was like, oh, what kind of comics did you read, like in the comic strips? Or I always called them funnies. I don't know if other people did.
Yeah.
I was like, well, because we see Beetle Bailey, and I was like, oh, I wonder if you'll jump across to other ones like Zitz, or I know I read Foxtrot and Blondie or Family Circus. But you kind of said you're like, anything's open. So I mean, that's exciting. Just hearing that as a reader.
Well, I think it's really cool. Like of course, Roach Riley is our big villain, our analog of Mort Walker's Beetle Bailey. But we've got a ton of different sort of Easter eggs and analogs and parodies and riffs of a ton of different characters in this book. The ones that I can say publicly, because some of them have been in our previews already. We have Melinda Mercury, who's kind of our riff on Dale Messick's Brenda Starr. She's Locke's new love interest, and I kind of thought it would be a cool idea. Who would be the worst person in the world for a cop to date? Reporter, and she'll play kind of a big role in the Roach Riley investigation. Moving forward, we've got riffs on Hagar the Horrible, on the Family Circus, on Marmaduke, on we shove a parody of Dilbert. We shove his head in a toilet. It's kind of fun. It's definitely the sort of thing that will reward eagle-eyed readers. Jorge already loves throwing Easter eggs in the backgrounds of things. People can see in Volume 1 that he gave us all stripper names on one page. So seeing what he does with all these kind of different cameo characters, that's really cool. And I think it kind of lends a rereadability to Volume 2. I will say though, because I want people to pre-order Volume 2, because I desperately want to do a Volume 3, there are a couple big strips that I've kind of held in the back pocket. I really want to do a Volume 3 badly. And, if you think Beetle Bailey is big, we haven't even begun to climb the mountain yet. And so consider that incentive for listeners of this to call your comic shop now and add Spencer and Locke 2 to your pull list.
Oh, yeah.
There's only been like a handful of times where I've felt that something just hit a niche that I wanted so directly that I felt almost attacked. Targeted. Yeah, attacked. I was like, I didn't know that was a thing that I was into, but now looking at it, I'm so into it. It's like there's got to be cameras somewhere.
René, I've told you a million times before, if you put on the tinfoil hat when you go to sleep, these things will stop happening.
But at the same time, I'm glad Spencer and Locke happened, so...
Thank you.
I mean, I'm very excited. And I'm trying to remain very calm, which these guys will attest is very hard for me to do.
Yes.
David, I was wondering if it would be possible for you to also maybe discuss a little bit about your other upcoming series, Going to the Chapel, a little bit. I couldn't help but notice that this is also coming out from Action Lab, and I was kind of wondering, after your first series came out and things went really well with them, was it sort of like they came to you and they're like, do you have anything else? Or did you say, if you liked this, I've got something else I'm considering? Or if you're able or willing, would you be able to get into that a bit?
Sure. Well, the great thing about Action Lab is they're not a publisher that gets in their own heads. They don't really put on any airs. And I give them a lot of credit. They are not a publisher that, they're thinking, oh man, is this going to be sellable? They work with a lot of sort of, up and coming, new talent. And so their thought is, does this look cool? Like, does this look like something that like we would enjoy and that would be fun? I can't tell you how many places I pitched Spencer and Locke to, just as an example. And I'll tell you that a top 5 publisher told me to my face, and I take this as a badge of honor. They said, this is the best pitch we'll never publish. I get it. Like, it's very combustible, material, both in terms of doing a parody of the most beloved comic strip of all time. And, also dealing with things like, mental illness and childhood trauma and PTSD. And, Action Lab didn't hesitate. And that was, there's something to be said for working with a publisher that's enthusiastic about you and your work. It's funny because, Going to the Chapel was a very similar situation that so many, that was a book that I fought really hard for. And I can't tell you how many people, when I would explain the storyline, which is Die Hard at a wedding, they said, that sounds awesome. We don't know how to sell this. And Action Lab, to their credit, I showed them that pitch and they said, let's do it. We actually were officially greenlit C2E2 of last year, the first night of C2E2. I got the official approval email when I got off the plane to Chicago.
Nice.
And so about a year later, the fact that the book is been announced and is almost finished production, it's really exciting. I think Going to the Chapel is the story of kind of the world's worst wedding, and that was before the bank robbers showed up. It
took a second for my brain to calculate what you just said. Thank you.
Sort of, I say if it's what if the Bluth family from Arrested Development got caught in a bank robbery that happened to be set during a wedding. That's very much kind of
I've made a huge mistake.
You made a huge mistake. Going to the Chapel, it's the story of a wedding that's taken over by a gang of Elvis-themed bank robbers, the Bad Elvis Gang. And the bride, at the center of everything, realizes that she's got to play both sides if she wants to get everybody out in one piece. This is it's a story about love and commitment and cold feet. And what exactly does it take for you to take that leap to say, till death do us part? In a lot of ways, Going to the Chapel was kind of my way of trying to stretch my muscles as a writer, but also a way for me to put my money where my mouth is. I by virtue of the structure of Spencer and Locke and the themes we were dealing with, our first volume, we didn't have as much representation as I would have liked, because by virtue of the setting and the themes, the representation would have been bad representation. It would have veered into stereotype, which is not what we wanted. And while we're able to correct that a little bit more with our supporting cast of Volume 2, I wanted to have a diverse cast, and I wanted to make sure, in this case, the idea of having a female lead was really important to me. The idea of having a bride who is dealing with cold feet, I think, is something we don't really see a lot of in popular culture. We see, it's the dude who's, struggling. The fact that we have two men of color, as our romantic interests. I feel like I wrote this before, Crazy Rich Asians came out, but before that movie came out, I thought, we don't often get to see like a sexy heartthrob Asian male romantic lead in popular culture. So that was something I really wanted to do with Tom, the ringleader of the Bad Elvis gang. But we've got, it's a big sprawling cast. I wanted to see what I could do with as many characters as I could throw in. So I think we have something like 15 or 16 people in the cast, and we get to check in on them at some point or another in every single issue. It's kind of cool. It's a little claustrophobic, also because most of the book is set in a singular location. It's in the chapel itself. It's been really cool, and working with my artist Gavin Guidry, he's really terrific. He's kind of in that space between a Chris Somney and a Jamie McKelvey. He's really gonna blow up big, I think, and so I'm really excited for this to be his direct market debut. Liz Kramer, this is also her direct market debut. She's the creator of the webcomic Threader. I think she's going to be the next Laura Martin. She was showing me just preliminary work on the third issue right now, and it is just beautiful. And then we have veteran letterer Ariana Maher, fresh from her work on James Bond 007, $6 Million Man over at Dynamite. I believe she's doing some work over at TKO Studios, and she's just terrific and sort of helping kind of get, similar to what we were talking about with Russ Wooten earlier. Ariana is the reason why all of our one-liners kind of connect. She's got a real nice bounce to her lettering, and and then we're working with a murderer's row of cover artists on this book. I can't spoil too many of them right now, but I can say that Lisa Sturl is doing a cover for our first issue, as well as Mon House, who's joining us from Spencer Locke. He's going to be doing a series of variants for this series as well. And then, of course, our interior artist, Gavin Guidry, who will be doing covers as well. But we've got a ton of really awesome names that we're going to hold in our back pocket until once the book is in pre-orders. But I had a couple covers hit my inbox just this week, and a third one that is the preliminary sketches. Final is soon to come. And boy, they're really terrific. And the women who are drawing these covers, they're just really spectacular. And so I'm excited to be working with them before they blow up so big that I can't work with them anymore.
Just a quick question.
Yeah. Go ahead, René.
Did you listen to Chapel of Love at all while writing this?
Yeah, for sure. I actually actually had to pay to use the rights for the lyrics for the series. We have our preview pages online, but I said it. Our very opening scene is kind of a quick montage between Emily, our bride, and Tom and the rest of the Bad Elvis gang. It's sort of cutting back and forth between them, as the wedding is starting to kick up. And as these bank robbers are about to walk into this church, and we've got the lyrics to Going to the Chapel playing in the background. I think there's something very iconic about the song, but there's also, if you listen to the lyrics, there's something a little haunting about it. Things like, we'll never be lonely anymore, or things that are a little ominous, I'll be his and he'll be mine. It's the song felt very loaded to me, and so it kind of worked out in terms of the title and in terms of the themes, and it was very kind of the rights holders of the song to let us use them in this series, and but yes, I definitely listened to it, and a bunch of other sort of old, kind of, 50s and 60s songs, things like The Night Has a Thousand Eyes, just to kind of get into that sort of kind of retro chic vibe for this kind of action-packed rom-com.
I gotta say, I feel like both of these series are just things that are just right up my alley. So I feel almost attacked, but in a good way.
Well, it's again, I thank you for not wearing the tinfoil hat, so I can kind of get important marketing.
He'll continue to keep projecting these thoughts directly into your brain. Yes,
please pre-order my book. No, the thing
transmissions won't cease.
Yeah, I hearing you say that is particularly encouraging for me, because part of the reason why I pursued going to the chapel was I felt like rom-coms get a bad rap. I think there's a lot of preconceived notions of what kind of stories rom-coms can tell, but also who is allowed to consume them. I think a lot of guys, especially, they're like, oh no, that's like, only women can watch rom-coms. And I'm like, no, that's ridiculous. Like, there's so many cool different stories that you can tell with sort of that romantic, that romantic kind of foundation. I'm just off the top of my head, I'm thinking, you can take a sci-fi bent, like About Time or Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, or you can take kind of that sort of tragic approach, like 500 Days of Summer. I feel like even, a movie like Baby Driver, kind of has that sort of solid romantic core to this kind of Fast and the Furious Italian Job kind of action to it. And so I wanted to write something that I thought could bring everybody to the table. I want to always try to build as wide a consensus as possible with my books. And I feel like rom-coms are like kind of an underserved market in the direct market these days. And, the coolest thing that I've been told about the book so far, we had some convention exclusive variants at C2E2. And somebody said that it felt like 90s Julia Roberts starring in 90s Quentin Tarantino. And I will take that. I will take that as a huge compliment, because I think I feel like there's something very human to this story about commitment and about like super dysfunctional families and about like it being very difficult to lay down some sort of painful truths, but also just like figuring out like who are the people that really love you and who are the people that will kind of stand up and do anything for you. It's kind of a very real but kind of messy but kind of I think very just really compelling themes. I laugh because I came up with the story. I was the best man at my oldest friend's wedding, and the bachelor party that I planned was cursed. I don't know, like everything went wrong.
Good.
Everything terribly wrong. Like the Airbnb was trashed, and like a bunch of people, like a couple people bailed at the last second because they decided they didn't want to pay. Like I rented an inflatable sumo set for backyard wrestling. Backyard wasn't big enough, so the company just left like a sad game of cornhole instead. And I actually wound up getting hospitalized 2 days before the thing. I got hit with a kidney stone, so I actually did not attend the bachelor party that I planned because I could not fly cross country. I was not cleared medically to do so. And I remember thinking to myself in this haze of Percocet, I said, well, thank God it didn't happen during the wedding. And then I thought to myself, but what if it did?
Are you saying there's going to be a sad game of cornhole in like issue 3 or?
I just thought, I was like, what's the worst thing that could happen during a wedding? And I thought at first, what if the bride's dad hired a bunch of leg breakers to take out the groom before, he walked his only daughter down the aisle? And then I thought, no, what if she just wasn't ready for it? And that kind of really became the core of going to the chapel. Is sort of, while all this kind of crazy, wild Murphy's Law stuff is going on with this increasingly, like, bizarre hostage situation, kind of like a Dog Day Afternoon in a way. You have this conflicted bride who's just trying to figure out, what the hell am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I think that's something that people can relate to. I feel like there are some people who have married their childhood sweethearts and lived happily ever after, and those people, like, good on them. That wasn't the case with me. While I had a great and wonderful relationship with my college girlfriend, we're not together anymore. And women I've dated since then, we are not together anymore. And so there's a lot of twists and turns when it comes to love. And seeing that alongside just some like really fun action that ties into the really robust imagery of a wedding. There was a lot of cool stuff to tap into. And I can say, we've got, I've read the whole series. We've got finished art and finished lettering. We're just wrapping up in our colors right now. And I'm really happy with how it turned out. I think this series as a whole, it has a lot of the same sense of humor as Spencer and Locke, but perhaps not the same kind of bleak tone. And I think, I think it's a love story. So I think at the end of the day, anybody can come in and I think find something to enjoy in this book.
Cool. A lot of this has me now worried because I'm getting married later this year, and now all I can think about is, oh no, everything's going to go wrong.
Well, I thought you were going to say, like, oh no, there's just going to eventually be a sad game of cornhole.
Just make sure that your fiance doesn't have any sort of bank robbers, waiting to take over the wedding. But anybody who
check
shows
that
up
box.
with this mask, tell them, like, sorry, you're not allowed in. Yeah, it's
Sounds like a pretty simple checklist. Yeah.
Cool. No Elvises at your wedding.
Gotcha. I'll make sure to put that at the top of the list of requirements. But, we are running out of virtual tape. I don't want to take up the rest of your day with this, because we could probably talk to you for the rest of the day if we really wanted to. But I realize we've all got things to do for the rest of this afternoon. I mean, Game of Thrones is happening tonight, so I want to get to that. I got to get my whole ritual prepared. So, David, where can people find you on the internet? Where can they find your comics?
Sure. Well, you can follow me on Twitter. It's just Pepose D. It's my last name and first initial. And then you can follow Spencer and Locke on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Spencer and Locke. That's just one word, all spelled out. Locke has a silent E at the end. And then you can follow Going to the Chapel also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The handle is Go to the Chapel. That's just one word, all spelled out, because Going to the Chapel does not fit on Twitter. Yeah, and then anybody listening, you can still pre-order the second and third issues of Spencer and Locke 2. You can tell your local comic shop that you want issue 1 as well. Stores tended to run out of our first volume pretty quickly, so they will be able to reorder for you. But pre-orders make or break indie books like ours. Like I've said, I really want to do a volume 3 for this book. I think people are going to love volume 2. So anyone who pre-orders volume 2, consider that essentially, one more vote to tell our publisher, hey, we want to see more of this series, and we'd really like to see it continue the way that the creators intended.
Definitely. I want to plug the rest of the stuff for the show. You can follow the rest of us on Twitter. Nick is at Death Star Plans. René is at Rodrigo29. I am at Mike Rappin, and the show is at IRCB Podcast.
You can join our Goodreads group. We have weekly threads. We have lots of discussions and fun stuff happening there. You can also check us out at ircbpodcast.com. We have a pronunciation guide for all the artists and creators that we have there. Maybe you're not quite sure what their names are. We aren't either. That's why we have the guide. And also, apparently, we have merch. So that's cool. You can check that out.
We would love it if you would take the opportunity to rate and subscribe our show, whether that's on iTunes, whether that's on Stitcher, or wherever you see fit. And just please tell your friends about the show, share it however you can, and if you haven't rated, why not? It helps us for sure. We would also love it if you emailed the show if you have any comments or questions or any jokes. Any of that stuff can be sent to ircb@destroythesybe.org. Please subscribe on Patreon if you haven't yet. That's patreon.com/IRCB podcast. You'll get access to exclusive audio, articles, early access to top of my pile posts, and so much, much more that we have in store for you. As Mike's pointed out, I think in the past, there's an upcoming series that he's doing with Paul about Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol that you just cannot miss.
Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all the music for our show. We can't thank them enough. Xander is a true wizard who has ascended down to this earth to help edit the show. He's a fantastic person, and he edits the show pretty well. We thank him for that. I want to say thank you to David for coming on the episode. You have been fantastic. Thank you to Nick and René as well for being on the show this week. I love you guys. And thank you to the listeners out there. You guys are fantastic. You are seriously some of the best people out there that read comic books and talk with us. It's always great to interact with you guys on the internet. So until next time, comics are good, and so are you.